Yes, please go ahead. We're on record.
Thank you. Thank you, Commission, for giving all Kashmiri Pandits here an opportunity to present our stories, our personal stories. So my focus is going to be on 4 personal stories which impacted me and my family. My first story is about Satish Tikku, who recently you have seen, pretty much everyone has seen in the movies, was killed by the terrorist Farooq Dar Bitta Karate. Satish Tikku was my dad's cousin sister's son. You know, he and his dad, Prithvinath Galdar, had a shop right next to Habakadal. And on the fateful night, morning of February 2nd, 1990, a terrorist Bitta Karate with his accomplice showed up at his home. His sister was very concerned as she saw Bitta Karate with his friend, and he kind of avoided Satish not to go out. But Satish was very, he had friends around the community, so he walked out, and in no time he was shot dead by Bitta Karate. And rest, he was taken to the hospital. The community tried to save him, but he died, unfortunately. And that story is documented in the recent Kashmir Files movie. My second family member his name is Kanyalal Bhatt. He was from Udru Sholipora, Badgam. And his date of assassination is June 8th, 1990. Kanyalal was my father's cousin sister's husband. He was one of the best legal advisors in the district Badgam. Popular among masses, he had 95% of his network was Kashmiri Muslims. He used to fight legal battles in the Badgam courthouse. He wanted to stay in his birthplace. And even after January 19th genocide call from all the mosques, he stayed back, just wanted to live in his motherland. In February 1990, his dad passed away, and he started looking for a priest to do the last rites for his dad. Could not find anyone. And then at that time, he realized that he wanted to send his family to safety to Jammu. So his 3 daughters and 1 son, he safely moved them to Jammu. And in May of 1990, he came back and he stayed back with his mother and his wife and his younger son. And on June 8th night, a few terrorists of Hizbul Mujahideen, 5 terrorists, knocked at his door and asked him to come out, and they wanted to talk to him. His family kind of pleaded to them that, just please don't take him. But they promised, they swear by their holy book that they were going to bring him back after having a conversation. And they waited for almost an hour, and then they started panicking because he did not come back. And they called on the neighbors for help, and the neighbors all fanned out and went all over the villages, nearby villages. And the next day morning, they found his body hanging in the fields with torture marks and gruesomely treated. So it was an unfortunate end to a very brave Hindu who stayed in his motherland and wanting to serve the community and staying back there, even though the call of genocide was given on 19th January 1990. My third close family, my friend from my schoolmate, his name is Ashwani Garyali from Chhatabal. He was a very sweet kid. He was my 1 year, 2 years older than me. His brother was my classmate in National High School. And Ashwani Garyali was studying for chartered accountancy. And he stayed back there and he was preparing for his exams. And in private, he was doing tuitions. And 5 terrorists showed up at his home and dragged him out, pumping bullets in his abdomen and his head. His dad picking him up, his dad's name, Shambhunath Garyali, picked him up and took him around, took him to the hospital. He first took him to the police station where he was ridiculed. He was not even given any support. Somehow he gathered him and took him to SMHS hospital where he was not treated, and he was sent to Saura Medical Institute. And in Saura Medical Institute, by the time he reached there, he passed away. If the authorities could have helped him, he probably would have been saved. Unfortunately, I lost my best friend, and I have memories playing with him in my childhood. And it was an unfortunate event of that young man who had nothing to do with all the slogans of Azadi and the Nizam al-Mustafa, which was being called on all the mosques everywhere. Um, my fourth example of the case is one of our family friends. His name is Ashok Kumar Bazaz, and he was a shopkeeper in Abiguzar, Chhatabal. And this gentleman had 7 daughters, and he was also very known in the community. His shop was pretty much in the majority Muslim community, and he used to help the community around. And unfortunately, terrorists just showed up at his home, pumped bullets in him, and left his large family just by themselves. And when they pleaded to the terrorists that, hey, please kill us as well, because you have killed our sole bread earner, and why don't you just kill all of us? And their comment back was that we want you to weep and wail for your family. So such were the atrocities against the communities. Again, just these were the 4 cases I brought to the commission, but there are thousands of stories of all of us not only being killed and ethnically cleansed from Kashmir, but also thereafter being in Jammu in the refugee camps. Many people have died. So,
sir, you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you. I have multiple stories I can share with the commission, and I'm sure my brothers and sisters on this call will share more stories about their personal lives and the personal impact. What do I want, and what exactly is my ask? I want the genocide to be recognized. I want justice for all my family members and my friends and community to be recognized. I want their return back to their homeland, and their plight be recognized. I want safe return and having safe zones for our community back in Kashmir, where they can live happily, they can practice their faith, and can contribute to the community as well. I want our children to go back and live in their roots. They're missing on a lot of those opportunities, and we are also losing our roots and culture. I want the government and the world civic body to help us help us save ourselves and our roots as well. So again, I want to thank the commission for the time and opportunity to present my personal story and our community's plight. Thank you.
Professor Nanda, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Kaul, for your moving presentation. And Mr. Clemens, before we have the second speaker, I am requesting Dr. Adityanji, who is the president of this prestigious organization, International Commission on Human Rights and Religious Freedom, to set the stage for our coming presentations.
Thank you, Professor Nanda. I will just give a brief presentation here. So the hearings have been organized by International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom. I will give you brief information on the commission. The Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom is a US-based nonprofit focused on upholding human rights and religious freedom through continuous monitoring, policy intervention, and collaboration. We are focused on educational, research, legal, and human rights advocacy and charitable purposes, and strive to be an advocate for human rights and religious freedom of underrepresented communities across the world. We believe that humankind can no longer afford to be selectively vocal about the rights of only a specific set of people. A humane and just world necessitates fair treatment of all living beings. Our focus is on indigenous rights and freedom, free speech, and their cultural preservation. This is our motto. This is our logo. Some of our activities and initiatives include monitoring violations of freedoms and sanctity of religious and philosophical minorities across the world, research into and documentation of the culture, history, challenges faced by such communities, policy recommendations on human rights, religious diversity, and pluralism to international organizations, agencies, national and local governments, collaboration to support cultural and philosophical diversity across the world, and Professor Ved Nanda Fellowship Training Program. I will skip this because we have already talked about what's the background of it. Some of you may have seen this in our flyer. I'm going to use another picture. Unfortunately, it may traumatize some of us, some of our witnesses who are involved, because that actually involves them personally. This picture is I obtained from internet. This is showing police personnel guarding the body of Neelkant Ganju, special sessions judge who was shot dead in broad daylight on a Saturday afternoon, and you will hear from a family member. So this is our hearing committee. The rules are that everyone should mute themselves to avoid noise interference. Change your cell phone setting to vibration modes. List of witnesses is confidential. We will try to include all the witnesses during the hearings, so time is limited. Those witnesses who are testifying will do so under oath. I'm going to administer the oath very soon. Please be precise and stick to your allotted time. Do not try to interrupt the witnesses. Those witnesses who have not submitted their written statements and pieces of evidence must do so within next 7 days. All the questions and comments can be through the chat function. If we have time, we'll take them. We are recording the event and it will be available later on our YouTube channel as well as on our website. A detailed report of this hearing will be published by the Commission in next few weeks. It is very important for us, for all the witnesses to give us evidence, the exhibits, personal statement, police reports, FIRs, newspaper clippings, magazine articles, any video documentation, any kind of documentation you can get hold of. Please submit to the Commission if you have not done so. I am going to administer the oath in a group fashion to all our witnesses, even Mr. Cole, who has spoken. I would suggest that you raise your right hand or place your right hand on a holy book like Bhagavad Gita, and I am going to administer the oath. You have to repeat after me. So those who are the witnesses and they know who they are, please unmute yourself so that you can speak the oath after me. Say I.
I
Call
State your name.
Mohanita
Solemnly swear.
solemnly
Swear affirm that the testimony I will be providing today
The testimony I will be providing today
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
The truth,
the whole truth,
whole
and
truth,
nothing but the truth.
and
nothing,
nothing but the truth.
truth.
So help me God.
God.
Since all the witnesses have been sworn in, including the one who spoke, we will continue with the hearings, and Mr. Clements will invite the next witness.
Yes, just requesting everybody, please mute yourselves again. I call upon Miss Anjali Raina.
Thank you, Commission, for giving us the opportunity as a community to talk about our stories and bring our genocide and ethnic cleansing before the committee. I would start with my some fond memories of my childhood in Kashmir, and then I will talk about my dad's brutal assassination. I have very fond memories of my childhood in Kashmir. There was a lovely chinar tree near my house in Chatabal. My ancestral house was located in downtown Srinagar. The chinar tree was used as a landmark when I was walking to school. I remember visiting Khir Bhavani every year with my maternal grandfather and my maternal uncles. We used to stay there for a whole 1 week. I have been born and brought up in a joint family. I lived with my grandparents, uncles, aunts, and with my dad and mom. I used to follow my grandma everywhere. I was heavily pampered, and since I was the first child in the family and my dad was the oldest sibling, my grandma is still alive. Unfortunately, she has been bedridden for the last 3 years. She is 92 right now. My grandfather was everything to me. He used to be at my school with new books, goodies every time I was promoted to new grade level. He passed away in 2009, and due to such an emotional attachment I had with him, the health issues I had exacerbated. I was submitted to the hospital 2 times in 2009. I have not been home until 2015, but briefly visited for 2 days due to my kids asking constantly, as they have wanted me to see my ancestral home, which is not my home anymore. The tournament began in 1990. I was only 18 at the time and had barely completed my high school studies when this tragedy hit our family. My father, late Sri Chamalal Kaul, an accounts officer in J&K Industries, was brutally murdered on 24 June 1990 by Islamic militants in the name of religion. They were killed because they were killing Hindus in the name of Free Kashmir. Learning about what had happened to my dad hurts me to my core, and it still does. My father was kidnapped from our home in broad daylight, afternoon of 24 June 1990, while he had settled himself for lunch. A day before his murder, he had prepared yellow rice, tahar, for one of my uncle's birthday. As per information we received, the food was scattered all over the floor. The Islamic jihadis tortured my father with cigarette burns, slit his throat, shot him with bullets, and they did not stop there. The height of the barbaric act was such that they cut his body in pieces and left in gunny bag on the Dr. Ali Jan Road near Savra Medical Institute, Srinagar, Kashmir. Due to the situation in Kashmir, when everyone was trying to leave, my dad stayed back due to the 3 reasons. First, his official obligations. He was in charge of finances and wanted to sign off on pay stubs as the holy festival Eid was falling around that time. Second, he was in an illusion that, like all of us, we are safe. Kashmiri Muslims are our brothers and no way they will harm us. My dad got betrayed like everyone did. Third, we had dad's aunt on the 3rd floor living by herself, and he did not want to leave her alone. I did not get to say final goodbye to my father. Last I saw him in the first week of March when I was boarding cab with my uncle and his newly wedded wife. He told us before we left Kashmir, nothing will happen to me. They are my friends. We never got to perform his last rites. The patrolling team who recovered the body had cremated him. My family had requested that one of us want to go to Kashmir to perform last rites, but we were told that it's not safe and we are not allowed. My grandfather was handed over the ashes from them. His ashes were immersed in Sangam, a point where the holy rivers Ganga, Jamuna, Surasti intersect, and it's at Allahabad. My father got added to the list of martyrs at a very young age, 46. He was at the time. I remember even after getting this unfortunate news, the whole day looked so gloomy and silent. It seemed like the sky was crying. It has been 32 years. However, there has been not a single day when I don't think of that fateful day. I haven't forgotten that my mother was only 44 at that time and has spent 32 years without him. I cannot forget the pain of my grandparents who lost their son at a very young age. Thank you.
I next call upon Ms. Swapna Raina.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I thank the Commission for organizing this special hearing on Kashmiri Hindu genocide of 1989-90. I would also like to express my gratitude for giving me an opportunity to testify at this hearing and hope to do justice to the immense responsibility entrusted to me. I, Swapnavali Raina, a proud American and an equally proud Kashmiri Pandit, was born and brought up in Kashmir and lived through most of those eerie times when Islamic militancy was at its peak in the valley. Perhaps even more unnerving was the growing fanatic sentiment that enabled these militant acts and supported this rise of violence. It's easy and convenient to deny the existence of this Kashmiri Hindu genocide. After all, political and religious lobbies have invested in pushing such a rhetoric for the past several decades. In case you think that the exodus and genocide didn't happen, then mine and lakhs of other families are a testament to the atrocities faced by Kashmiri Hindus. We were left hopeless to fend for ourselves. No one willingly leaves their home and heritage behind. Each family has a heart-wrenching story from the exodus where they were forced to leave their lives behind. Opportunity to speak today is a ray of hope to tell and educate the world about our miseries while the world decided to stay silent. We are repeatedly asked to give proof for atrocities committed on us or outright being told that these are all lies. How do you respond when your own grandfather was shot dead in cold blood by terrorists for his faith and the fact that he was true to his values and his beliefs? Justice Neelkan Ganju, Daddy Ji, as all grandkids lovingly called him, was a district and sessions judge in Kashmir. Memories from November 4th, 1989 still give me goosebumps. Coming out of the Jammu and Kashmir High Court complex, he was accosted by 3 men and shot at in point-blank range at the busy Hari Singh High Street. One of my aunt's neighbors who owned a shop on the same street was an eyewitness to the dastardly act of the terrorist, and he saw my grandfather in pain, wanted to help, but couldn't, as people were threatened to receive the same fate as my grandfather if they did. Adding insult to injury, many bystanders started dancing, shouting Maqbool Butt's death has been avenged, chanting pro-Pakistan slogans and waving Pakistan flags. Thousands of people in the valley celebrated the killing of my beloved grandfather. Thousands, let that sink in. Thousands who justified killing a man of virtue and law simply because he was a Hindu. Someone dared to place a file that he was holding under his head. My heart breaks every time I think what my dearest Daddy Ji must have gone through in those final hours. Even though narrating the story brings traumatic flashbacks and a lot of agony, I will not stop speaking till justice is served. Till date, no police report of his murder is found, no disclosures, no post-mortem was conducted. In short, none of the basic protocols were followed. It gets worse. The JKLF terrorist Yasin Malik, in an interview with the British Broadcasting Corporation, confessed to killing Justice Neelkan Ganju. In the interview, he brazenly admits that JKLF killed the judge. BBC gave Yasin Malik their platform to boast of murdering innocent people and never questioned or condemned his actions. BBC hasn't given such a platform to Hindus to tell their story. Where is justice for the family of victims who, because of their faith, became targets of radical Islam when Yasin Malik continues to roam free, is given celebrity status and invited to various events, the Prime Minister's residence, India Today conclave, and introduced as a youth icon, to name at the very least, while my community, some still living in refugee camps, are waiting for justice and longing to go back home. No one who was there can ever forget the fateful night of January 19th, 1990, when tens of thousands of Islamic jihadis poured into the streets of the valley shouting slogans like, Hum kya chahte Nizam-e-Mustafa, Reliv Zaliv ya Galiv, Aise Kashmir, But of Rosti, But Nafsan. As I translate these, please think and reflect on these bone-chilling chants blaring from the loudspeakers all around you all night long. There will be only rule of Islam in Kashmir. Convert, leave the land, or die. We want Kashmir without Kashmiri Pandit men, but with women. And then we are asked, why did you flee? What would you do in that situation? When would you run? When your beloved one gets gunned down, or wait to see if they came to rape your daughter? I ask again, what would you do in that situation? Wouldn't you flee to save your life and honor? These slogans were threats directed at Kashmiri Hindus, telling them they were not welcome in Kashmir any longer. I don't know if and when I'll be able to take my children to Kashmir. I for sure cannot take them back to my ancestral home, as that does not exist anymore. Thousands of Kashmiri Hindu homes were destroyed, illegally occupied, and succumbed to distress sale as money was needed to survive. This is just my story. Imagine lakhs of such gruesome narratives that have left people scarred for life. I'm proud to say that we Kashmiri Hindus never picked guns. We focused on education and reestablishing ourselves. Even after facing such circumstances, we were never taught to hate Muslims. Not even once did my parents spew hatred towards the community, but always expressed disappointment towards the government and the people who failed them in Kashmir. These people were not only our neighbors, but friends, colleagues, classmates. My testimony today is not just for my grandfather, but for the countless victims in every decade since, including as recent as within the last few months, who were killed and singled out because of their faith. How many more Kashmiri Hindus must die before the government and the world acknowledges our genocide? I'm glad that finally an esteemed panel of the Commission has invited the real victims of Kashmiri Hindu genocide who faced persecution, mass murder, and ethnic cleansing, and are live witnesses to the brutal atrocities committed on us. Both human rights and religious freedoms of indigenous Kashmiris has been denied for a long time. Just like the Holocaust, as more survivors age and die, the number of the Holocaust deniers rises. We Kashmiri Hindus face the same fate. Where were the stalwarts of human rights when Kashmiri Hindus were tortured, raped, and brutally killed? Where were the champions of religious right freedom when our basic right to practice our religion was curtailed, our temples renamed, and their sanctity desecrated and destroyed? There is no denial that other communities have also suffered. However, today, I will only highlight pain and suffering of Kashmiri Hindus, as we have been repeatedly ignored as if we never existed. The world didn't just remain silent whenever Kashmiri Hindus asked for justice. The world actively silenced us, blamed the victims of Islamophobia instead of condemning those who killed in the name of Islam. If you are more offended by the truth than the crimes itself, then you are enabling the genocide. Today's planned event has rekindled the dwindling hope for us, hope that people will listen, acknowledge, empathize, and understand what we have gone through. It's about time the world pays attention and acts when we speak up as victims of ethnic cleansing. I would like to question all who deny the fact that my grandfather was killed because he was a Kashmiri Hindu. Justice Neelkant Ganju was the only non-Muslim in the trial of Maqbool Butt. The prosecutor, defense lawyer, eyewitnesses, police investigators, all were Muslims. As I understand, capital punishment has to be confirmed by High Court before it is executed. Yet another Muslim, Justice Ali, Chief Justice in High Court, confirmed the sentence. Then why? Why did only my beloved grandfather have to pay the price with his life? This is a clear case of one of the many brutalities unleashed by Islamic terrorists on Hindus, Kashmiri Hindus in the name of religion. What we Kashmiri Hindus expect is accepting that it was a genocide, accept that it was a period of shame for our country, accept that humanity failed us. If you are still in denial, then accept that you are failing us again. Help us in prosecuting Yasin Malik, Bitter Karate, and other terrorists. Urge the government to help the economically weak sects of Kashmiri Hindu families. Help Kashmiri Hindus go back to their homes respectfully, without fear, on their own terms.
Ms. Raina, 1 minute left. Thank you.
We don't need your pity, but togetherness to help us get justice after 32 long years. This is your time to support us. Support truth, support humanity. We have waited a long time. My fight for justice, Neelkan Ganju, and many others who fell victims to the brutal atrocities continues. Thank you for your time and attention.
Swapna Rana ji, thank you very much for your moving testimony. And we are trying very hard as the commission, we will, in order to see that justice is served. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I next call upon Mr. Ravinder Pandita. Please unmute yourself now.
And thank you, Commission, for giving me an opportunity to present my story. I am Ravinder Pandita and belong to Bhagatpura village of Handwara in district Kupwara, North Kashmir, which was more influenced and affected in the beginning of the militancy. The militants who came from across the border had to cross these villages, towns to reach the other parts of the valley. During their stay, they used to influence and motivate the young boys to join them. As a result, in every town, armed militants were seen roaming around freely, showcasing their weapons. The majority of Kashmiri Hindus were forced to flee the valley as a result of target by JKLF and Islamic insurgents during the late 89 and early 90s. During this period, massive crowds assembled in mosques across valley, shouting anti-India, anti-Hindu slogans. This resulted in hundreds of innocent pandits tortured, killed, women gang raped. Close to 600,000 pandits had to escape from the valley and take refuge in our own country at various cities, Jammu, Delhi, or many other cities. For the first time since independence, Kashmiri pandits found themselves abandoned to their fate, stranded in their own homes, encircled by rampant mobs. Through the frenzied shouts and blood-curdling sloganeering of assembled mobs, Kashmiri pandits saw the true face of intolerance and radical Islam. Even though the seed of all this was sowed earlier when the Anantnag riots happened and hundreds of temples and houses were burned, it became apparent to pandits on 19 January 90 that Kashmiri Muslims have decided to throw them out of the valley. Broadcasting vicious jihadi sermons and revolutionary songs intercepted with blood-curdling shouts and shirks became a routine task of the radical Islamists of the valley to force Hindus to flee. Some of the slogans used were Kashmir mein agar rehna hai, Allahu Akbar kehna, Pakistan se rishta kya, La ilaha illallah, Kashmir banayenge Pakistan, bato varai batiyon san. We will turn Kashmir into Pakistan along with Kashmiri women, but without menfolk. Kashmiri pandits were given three choices: Relive, Value, or Salute. Means convert to Islam, be ready to die, or leave Kashmir immediately. Explosive and inflammatory speeches were being broadcast from mosques in order to install fear into already terrified Kashmiri Pandit community. Considering the migration of many Pandits, my father, late Sri Jagannath Pandita, decided to shift too. My father was a government employee working with the Revenue Department, a true nationalist and brave man who never compromised with his self-esteem. He was a social worker too and was always helping Muslim neighbors. He would help the farmers to settle the agricultural disputes, but all his virtues had no effect to the terrorists and local Muslims who were witness to his martyrdom. He, like many of the people in the town, believed that the situation in the valley will get normal soon and all who left have to return. He also thought all his Muslim neighbors were his friends and they cannot harm me. He thought house cannot be left alone and vacant, and someone needs to be there to take care of it. So he stayed back and sent his family with the rest of the extended family to Udhampur near Jammu. I had already lost my mother in a tragic accident in 1978 when I was just 5 years old. The thing seems to be temporary, as we had the conception that we will probably return back home shortly. But the situation was shaping up in the ugliest manner, and militancy was peaking day by day. Back home at Handwara, as time started to move on, a relative from my mother's side also moved on to stay with my father. The lack of communication between my father in Handwara and rest of the family in Udhampur increased agony of both sides. Yet we were trying to get busy with the daily schedule till one evening when everyone was sitting in front of the radio set for the daily news, the only source of information about the ongoing situation in the valley, and all of a sudden we heard the devastating news that shattered us. The news broadcast was about the 2 persons who have been brutally killed in Handwara town, and the names shattered us. Panic struck the whole family and did not understand as to what should be done. We 3 brothers were motherless teenagers and too young to handle the situation. The incident happened in the intervening night of 7th and 8th October 1990. 2 of them had just started their dinner when there was a knock on the main door. They hardly had eaten, as was evident by the scene of the room when 2 plates were filled with food were found. It was local Muslim who used to work in our orchard who called my dad out to the waiting armed militants. Both men
Mr.
were
Pandita,
dragged.
you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Both men were dragged and taken out of our orchard and were tortured for hours, as was visible from the whole scene onto the body, and they were strangled with the barbed wire used for fencing and later hanged on a tree with a note saying, "Whoever touches the bodies will face the same consequences." After 3 days, the bodies were taken down by my uncle who was working in Srinagar along with the local police. Unfortunately, the bodies were not allowed to be cremated in and around Handwara and later taken to Kupwara for cremation. Despite having 3 sons, we could not perform last rites of our martyred father, one of the biggest regrets a son can have throughout his life. This was a setback for the whole family, especially to me, because I was more attached to my dad. And I went into a depression for close to 2 years and had to be admitted to hospital and medical, under medical supervision. And later, my elder brother sent me for further studies, which actually helped me to overcome that trauma. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Panditaji.
Thank you, Mr. Pandita. Our next scheduled speaker is Mr. Rajiv Pandit, but I don't see him in the list of attendees. If you're here, please let me know. In the meantime, I call upon Mr. Sanjay Kaul. Please unmute yourself.
Honorable members of the Commission, I thank you for organizing a hearing on Kashmiri Hindu genocide. Honorable Chair Professor Vednanda, Vice Chair Professor Yashwant Pathak, and Member Dr. Adityanji. Today I speak before you as a victim and a survivor of the genocide inflicted on the indigenous Hindus of Kashmir. It is unfortunate but true that the world so far has remained silent and continues to remain silent towards the plight of Kashmiri Hindus. My ancestors, my forefathers, all belong to the land called Kashmir. I'm a Kashmiri Hindu. The Hindus of Kashmir are also known as Kashmiri Pandits. Kashmir has been a seat of learning for the Hindus. Though Islam came to Kashmir in 14th century, in less than 7 centuries, Hindus have been rendered a minuscule minority in Kashmir. We have faced 7 exoduses so far. We are the victims of the worst ethnic cleansing in Kashmir post India's independence. Our homes, our lives in Kashmir were destroyed by the radical Islamic terrorism. Our voices were diminished by the most brutal fashion by the Kashmiri terrorists. I am Sanjay Kaul, born and brought up in Kashmir. I am one of those thousands of Kashmiri Pandits who were forced out of our homes in Kashmir. After leaving Kashmir, I moved to Boston, United States of America in 1991, and now I am an American citizen of Indian origin. I am here to share my story of survival and talk about my experience. Let me tell you, my heart has never stopped beating for Kashmir. Have you ever felt intense pain in your heart of the highest magnitude when your heart beats so hard that you feel that it will jump out of your body? I have. My family home was located in a colony called Jawahar Nagar, barely a mile away from famous Lal Chowk in Srinagar. On the night of January 19th, 1990, the loudspeakers from all the mosques in Kashmir Valley came alive with the announcement for Muslims to come out on the streets. The slogans were, "Hum kya chahte azadi," "Indian dogs go back," "Hum chahte Nizam-e-Mustafa without Hindu men but with their women." Thereafter, hundreds and thousands of people came out on the streets screaming and yelling, "Raliv, Saliv ya Galiv." This was their slogan. They attacked Hindu houses to break out or open our doors to kill us and to play with the honor of our women. That's the kind of fear I have seen and faced. I felt like a frightened pigeon. My story is intimately connected with the trauma that my family has faced. What happened in 1990 was no ordinary thing. It was the persecution of an ethnic minority on the basis of its religion. Our women were raped, men were killed, our homes and businesses were looted and burnt, our temples and religious institutions were destroyed. I am one of nearly 400,000 Kashmiri Hindus who were expelled from Kashmir Valley by a combination of violent and explicit threats by the Islamic terrorists. The insurgency in Kashmir actually started in 1986, but spread like wildfire in 1989. The mayhem in Kashmir started with the murder of our great leader, Pandit Tikalal Tapalu, followed by the killing of Justice Nilkant Gunju. That was also followed by the killing of the station director of Srinagar Doordarshan, Sri Lasakol, and Pandit Sarvanand Premi, a known scholar. These were one of many of the first murders that were made possible in Kashmir just to create an atmosphere of fear so that a full-scale genocide could be launched. During that disturbing phase, numerous women were raped right in front of their families. More than 1,500 Kashmiri Pandits and more than 5,000 security personnel were murdered. The militants did not stop at the killing of individuals only, but followed up by mass massacres that took place from time to time at Sangrampura, Gul, Vandahama, Telwani, and Nadimar. Simply said, it has been a continuous campaign of well-planned genocide against us, the minority Hindu community of Kashmir. Give the dog a bad name and kill it. This is how Kashmir was sanitized. Posters were posted outside mosques and Hindu houses, labeling Hindus as mukhbirs, meaning we are the informers and agents of Indian government, thus branding us as traitors.
Mr. Kaul, you have 1 minute. Thank you.
Warning signs were issued and posted everywhere. On the day one day I heard gunshots. When I ran out to see what had happened, I saw a young man bleeding on the street corner. When we tried to help him, the local SHO, the station house officer, came near me and warned me not to touch him and threatened that I would be next. You could not complain to anybody. The state police and the Kashmir government were working with the separatists and for the separatists. In 1990, I worked for the civil PWD department, and I was the only Kashmiri Hindu after January 19th, after everybody from my community had left. I was taunted in my office and told, why do I come to work every day? I should also leave. One day, fortunately for me, I was late for work, and I call it fortunately because that day When I came late, there was a bomb blast in my office, and the bomb had been placed in the room where I used to sit. After that, we had to leave. There was a note placed on the gate of my house which said, you have 48 hours to leave Kashmir, otherwise you will be killed and your family will be killed. We had no choice but to leave. I will tell you this, I find myself like helpless like a bird without wings, and we have meant no harm, yet we have been brought to a place in time where we are about to be extinct. We did not throw stones, we did not burn buses, we did not pick guns. What was our fault? Our fault was just simply being Hindus and loyal patriotic citizens of India. And for that, we have paid a big price. My submission to this august body is that we are at the crossroads of time. We plead for justice, we plead for support. I appeal to this body that we as Hindus reaffirm our demand to carve out a union territory within Kashmir where we can live with honor and dignity in our homeland without the fear of getting robbed, raped, or killed, and with full freedom of speech, liberty, and justice, and political freedom, and also the freedom to practice our religion, and we be able to manage our affairs ourselves. In the meantime, I also want to say one thing, that Panun Kashmir, a political voice representing Kashmiri Pandits, has prepared a genocide and atrocities prevention bill that has been presented to the Indian parliamentarians in year 2020. We hope that it gets enacted by the Indian Parliament so that the genocide of Hindus or any other community does not happen the way it happened with us in Kashmir. I thank you all for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Sanjay Kaulji. And the Commission will try its utmost in order to make sure that the demands that you put, that we can pursue them, follow them up. Thank you.
I next call upon Mr. Himanshu Ganju. Please unmute yourself.
I apologize. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Namaskar. My name is Himanshu Ganju. I am here in Michigan, United States of America. I want to thank you, each and every individual here, those who have invited me on this panel. I don't have a lot of recollection from Kashmir altogether. I was born in Jammu. My father was Professor Kundalal Ganju, and my mother was Pranav Ganju, who was a lecturer in Kashmir. And I have a picture of them as well. And very well-known people in Kashmir and Sopore. I hear a lot of things, good things about them as an individuals from a lot of people, those who remember them as an individual. I don't have that much of story behind the rest of the Kashmir because I was 5 years old and don't have much recollection from that. But I do have a story which is very personal to me, and which is every single time I talk about that to anybody, it creates tears in my eyes. But me being 5 years old, it was very difficult for me to recollect that what has actually happened. Me being with my grandmother raised me in Jammu, and I didn't know that my parents were killed in the genocide in Kashmir. And my father, who was a senior scientist in agriculture college, and he believed in those people, and not naming anybody, but I have heard a lot of different stories from a lot of different people, what has actually happened, which should have not happened. The only thing what my father thought, that he believed in those people and said that I believe in them. It's fine. It's not something. It's going to be fine. But unfortunately, it was not fine. The day, I still remember the day I still can close my eyes and still can recollect my lost time I saw my dad and my mom. When I was playing outside, I was playing cricket with one of my neighbors, and my father told me that let's go to Baramulla to see my grandmother, and we did. And I was in the clothes which I was playing outside, and did not had much plans to stay with my grandmother for my whole life. And he told me to let's go to see my grandmother, and I did. And I cried in front of him that I don't want to go to my grandmother's place, because I'm pretty sure that she will tell me to stay there for an overnight, because I was more of like mama baby to my mom. And I still remember I sat on the scooter, and just we went to Baramulla, and my grandmother was planning to go to Jammu next day. The day before that day, my grandmother came to Sopore, where we were, and she told my parents, let's leave. This is the time for you guys to leave as well. You guys are helping me to leave Kashmir, but you guys need to leave as well. But unfortunately, they were not sure what is going to be happening in their life in the near future. And they were resistant in terms of like not leaving, because they believed in the people, those who are around them. Those thought that they are the well-wishers, but unfortunately not. We went to Baramulla, and my dad said that he's going to come back tomorrow. I still remember as a 5-year-old, I'm not able to recollect all those things, what has happened, but some of the stuff is already in my mind, and it's sad. And he left, and I stayed there at my grandmother's place, my maternal grandmother's place. And next day till 11, 12, he did not show up, and we thought maybe something is wrong. And I still remember that my father's friend, one of his very good friend of his, came to Baramulla to check on us whether, and he asked my grandmother, stating that, was Gasha here? My father's name was Gasha, and they said, were they here? And my grandmother said that no, unfortunately they were not here. You should know better than us, rather than we telling you. And he left. And realizing me as an individual, realizing he was on the same scooter what my father's used to be. And my grandmother told us, you stay with the neighbors, and I will go ahead and check them out. He left. She left to see if she can be able to go to Sopore, but unfortunately she was not able to, because of the curfew going on in Sopore. And she came back. She said, that we are going to leave, and we'll go to Sopore to drop these kids. Sister, she the cops and the police did not allow us to go to Sopore, and they told us not to go to Sopore because there's a lot of terrorism going on that time. And we left to Jammu, not knowing where we were planning to go. I know that my maternal aunt used to live in Jammu, because my maternal aunt's husband was in Secretariat.
Sir, you have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Thank you. And we stayed there at Jammu with them for almost a year in a small apartment where there were 2 rooms, and we stayed there for more than 10 or 15 people, which is really sad to see what has happened to Hindus. I, as an individual, want to address this to each and every individual here, and want to address to all the Hindus to wake up. It's a wake-up call for everybody. We don't need. I do appreciate Vivek Agnihotri to make this movie. Out of that, we as an individuals need to wake up. It's a wake-up call for all the individuals as Hindus, and I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. Thank you.
Himanshu Ganjuji, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for
In the chat, the only comment I hear is heartbreak.
It
And
is.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I next call upon Ms. Sunita Tikku. Please unmute yourself. Sunita Tikku. If she isn't here, I will.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Namaskar, everybody. First of all, I would like to extend my humble gratitude for giving my voice, this is the voice of a common Kashmiri Hindu Pandit, for giving my voice a chance to be heard. And while I was hearing all the stories, I just realized I need to put my story in towards the end, but I want to first of all say, what do we want? Because we are already in the process of establishing the fact that this is a genocide. And what do we want? What do we want is that we Hindus, Kashmiri Hindus, are striving for awareness or justice. We need both. Firstly, because this Kashmir Files movie, the Kashmir Files movie, has generated that space where we can have more awareness of the people. And now, what would be justice? Justice is holding a formal governmental inquiry into the genocide. Justice is passing bills in Parliament to recognize and prevent the genocide. Justice is bringing the culprits to book. And most importantly, justice is rehabilitating us securely back in Kashmir in such a way that we and other non-Islamic minorities are not vulnerable to continued genocide. I want my grandchildren to go back in summers to their summer home in Kashmir. I want to spend the rest of my old age in the land that bore me. I want to be cremated in Kashmir and my ashes to be spread all over the holy land of Vitasta. I want to be rooted back in the soil that I came from. And now going back to my story, just as the first basic right in Article 1 says that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. But that was not true at all in the neck of my woods. Although we were part of the majority in India, yet we were treated like a stepchild by the majority in Kashmir, who are Muslims, reaping benefits of minorities from the central government. Kashmiri Muslims never allowed any of the benefits to be given to the minorities like Hindus, Sikhs, and Christians in the state. We were most of the times left to fend for ourselves while they enjoyed the perks of central government. In the late 1980s, a lot started changing in Kashmir. Our politicians chose to turn a deaf ear to early warning signs. Too many madrasas started springing up. Everybody was sending their kids to madrasas, where the main goal was to brainwash. So by 1989, Kashmiri Muslims, especially the young ones, as well as the old ones, had been thoroughly brainwashed in their madrasas and elite homes that they could become an independent Islamic state for which they just had to throw out the indigenous Hindus. This is what a young terrorist actually said. So instead of killing them all, them here means us all, and wasting so much ammunition, we figured a better plan of terrorizing, harassing, and petrifying a community by ghastly murders. And these were done by like chopping bodies, gouging eyes out, breaking all bones, chopping heads, raping and then dismembering bodies, dancing and celebrating around dead Hindu bodies, hanging tortured bodies from trees, sectioning live humans on bandsaws and so on. Yes, kill one and scare 1,000. That was the tactics adopted by our aggressors. In my family, they came to kill my dad, who, with God's grace, survived. But my grandfather, grandmother, and my uncle were fatally shot. 2 of them died on spot. This happened on October 15th, 1991. This is 1.5 years after January 1990. Because my father, like Anjali's father, he believed that there was no harm. He could stay in Kashmir. He would be safe. His colleagues would protect him. And he had 3 or 4 attempts on his life. But he still believed that no, he could stay in Kashmir and be okay. The terrorist came into my mom's father's house, because my mom and dad were staying in my grandparents' house at that time. It was not safe to be living in the house that we owned. And they first wanted to get hold of one of my uncles and my grandfather's brother. But my mom hid my uncle and her uncle inside like a small store, and they went around looking for them, but eventually they gave up and they couldn't find them, and they told them we'll be back. So that very night, my grandfather's brother, like my mom's uncle, and my uncle would be my mamaji, they fled that night only. So on the fateful night of January 1990, all the clocks in the mosques of Kashmir Valley were synchronized, and exactly at 10 p.m. all over the valley, there was a huge war cry from the loudspeakers: Relive, Saliv, Ya Galiv. Translation: convert, or flee, or die. These were the choices given to us after such murders. They wanted Kashmiri Pandits to run, but leave their women folk behind, for which
1 minute mark.
For which they used the slogan, "We want freedom and Kashmiri Hindu women without the Kashmiri Pandit." And we want Yahan Kya Chalega Nizam-e Mustafa, only the rule of Prophet or Sharia law. It was a properly executed plan of removing our existence from there, and the design was implemented by even changing the names of towns like Anantnag to Islamabad, and a constant denial of our genocide, calling it a Jagmohan conspiracy. To keep the fear alive, the ongoing killings are still happening selectively, like killing a teacher, a pharmacist, a political activist recently, and so on. So this is not a 32-year-old story. It continues to happen. Need I mention that we are the indigenous race that has been there for more than 5,000 years, and now we are at the brink of extinction. When we were hounded out of our homes, we became refugees in our own country. And since we are not a vote bank, nobody paid attention to us. Even America was always trying to protect the vulnerable populaces of the world, ignored our plight. Somehow we became invisible to the whole world while we were trying to survive under hostile and miserable conditions. And our perpetrators, who had a lot of funding from a lot of foreign resources, kept on building their false narratives all over the world. A common question asked is, how is it a genocide? Given our minuscule number, people don't realize that we are a small ethnicity which comprised less than 5% of total population of Valley of Kashmir. So when a couple of thousand Kashmiri Pandits get killed, that's a big number for a small ethnic group. It's not a big deal for people asking questions. They immediately bring in the fact that thousands of Muslims have died in Kashmir. What about them? That's very unfortunate and utterly sad. Every life is precious, and may no one have to lose their loved one in such a way. Sadly, for the disillusioned Kashmiri Muslims, it is what they signed up for. They were readily and proudly sending their children for training, and were proud that their children would attain martyrdom. What were we dying for? Just because we're Hindus. And as per the UN Convention of the Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide, Article 2 has 5 categories, and we fit in 4 of those categories. Number 1, killing members of the group. Number 2, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Number 3, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. And number 4, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. And then last one is forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Last one doesn't apply, but the rest 4 apply to us. It fits us completely. And yet we still have to justify this as a genocide. Is it not a genocide? As I'm saying this, there's a stabbing pain filling my heart. Maybe in a decade or two, all of us Kashmiri Pandits would have assimilated and there would be no sign of a Kashmiri Pandit. An indigenous ethnicity of 5,000 plus years, continuity in the Valley of Kashmir, made of highly educated people, will become extinct because their perpetrators had sold the narrative to the big forces of the world. But this can change, and then change can start here. Thank you very much.
Next, I call upon Mr. Vikas Raina. Please unmute yourself. Request all witnesses to please stick to the time limit. Thank you.
Thank you, esteemed panel, for giving us this opportunity to narrate our stories of genocide. I am Vikas Raina. I was 10 years old. I belonged to a place known as Sopore, which was actually the epicenter of terrorism in 90s. The story starts in 87. We have built a new house, and there was a colony by the name of Nurbagh Colony in Sopore, and we shifted to that place. We were the only Hindu house there, and there were hundreds of Muslim houses there. We were the only Hindu houses. In 89, it started. I was a kid, and Muslim kids started talking about the religion. They used to be very indifferent with me, in the sense they started ignoring me and all that. When I used to tell them, they said, this is told in masjids that you don't have to play with kafirs, you are kafirs and all that. And it started like this. I remember the night of 21st Jan, my father came, and it was 4 o'clock in the morning. He came that we have to leave. So I told him where. He said we have to go to Jammu. The condition is not, I and my sister were sleeping, and the condition is not good. We have to leave. I went out and I saw a truck. I saw 16 people inside that truck. My father loaded something, 2 suitcases and some stuff and all that. There were almost 4 families inside the truck, and we reached Udhampur. My father was, this is a story of my father. He was a well-educated person. My mother was a lecturer. My father was MSc Electronics from Agra University. He was also a lecturer, and he was a very young officer. And remembering this, in 1993, he was promoted, and he was posted during this migration only, this tenure. He was posted as principal, higher secondary school, Kargil. And he went there, and he served for 3 years. There was a norm in Kashmir that if you serve in such remote areas, when you come back, you get posting of your choice. But when he came back, he was told that we cannot give you posting of your choice. This was the first violation. And you have to go to some other remote area, which was Ghul, which was highly Hizbul Mujahideen terrorism infested area. So my father accepted this, and he went to Ghul, and he served there for 3 years more. And then when he came back, he was supposed to join in Jammu, and he was, the letter was there. He was called up by education minister, and that time director education, and he was told, no, you have to give 1 more year there. You cannot. It was 1997 March at that point of time. So my father was very depressed. He came home, and he said, maybe I'll take the retirement and all that. But he was a very good officer. So he said, okay, I'll do it for 1 more year. Taking something from the background that the school he went in Goul was at that time there were only 200 students which were enrolled, but for 3 years when he worked there and his team, they enrolled almost 700 students. So this was something which was threatening terrorists, because education is the biggest enemy of terrorism. So when he came back, and then I remember 15th of June 1997. This is 7 years after Exodus, after our Exodus, 7 years after that. So I never knew that this mad jihadism will catch us after 7 years. So people, they were in the bus, they were going back to school after holidays and all that. They were in the bus. And I remember saying, my mother, he left at 4 o'clock in the morning for the bus to travel to Goul. I remember saying my mother that I woke up at 8 o'clock and told my mother, where is dad? She said he left. And I remember telling her that at least you should have told me, I should have told him goodbye at least. I never knew that I will never be able to say goodbye to him again. So comes the day, they were traveling in bus, 40 kilometers before Goul, they were stopped. And there were 6 terrorists which came, and they said, make a line. And Kashmiri Pandits purely make a line that Muslims go from one side, Hindus go from one side. And that too, in those Hindus also, Kashmiri Pandits were isolated. So they were told that our commander wants to, because my dad had a very good reputation in that area. So a lot of people said, don't go, don't talk to their commander. But my dad said, okay, we'll talk to these commanders and all that, what they are saying and all. And these militants swore by their holy book, Muhammad and all that, and they took them away. There were 3 people, 3 Kashmiri Pandits. One was Ashok Kumar Raina, my father. One other was Ravindra Kabu. My father was 46 years old. Ravindra Kabu was 33 years old. He was a lecturer. And then there was other guy, Sushil Bhatt, who was 29 years old. And he was also a lecturer. They were taken and they were shot. They were taken near the cliff and they were shot, dead. I have seen my father's body in my hand with 12 bullets. This was not something we were born for. A Kashmiri Hindu was not born for all those things. We were only killed because we were Hindus. We were nationalist Hindus. We were targeted only because of our religion. So whenever somebody says that these were some random killings, they were not. They were selective killings. As somebody said, you kill one and scare thousands. So this was the rule which was applied at that point of time also. And our genocide continued not only in 1990, but after for 32 years, like recently also some killings were done. So the story is something like people still are denying that genocide never happened. Genocide never happened. Actually, the people who are denying those are genocide enablers. Because what we actually want from everybody, from government of India and everything, a tribunal should be constituted to look into these killings, to look into these genocide, the genocide that has happened. Proper rehabilitation plan should be done. Proper security should be given if people are to be rehabilitated there. Because we were subjected to 3-4 types of genocide. One was a criminal genocide. Second was a cultural genocide. Third was an emotional genocide and a psychological genocide also. Because it's not only people died with bullets and all that. After migration, there were more than 5,000 deaths which happened because of snake bites, because of sunstroke, because of hypertension, because of other heart problems which happened because we were dragged from that place. And we in independent India, I am saying this with surety, are the only community which has been uprooted from its native place. This has happened to none of the communities after 47. So we are the only one, and we didn't got justice. We want justice. This is the only closure. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikas Rana ji. Thank you.
I next call upon Dr. Mohan Sapru. Dr. Sapru, please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Dr. Mohan Sapru. I am born and brought up in Srinagar, Kashmir, and now settled here in the US. Religious persecution and terrorism are twin blots on the conscience of humanity. No one knows that better than the persecuted Kashmiri Hindus who have experienced 7 exoduses from the Muslim-dominated Kashmir Valley over the last 600 years. More recently, in the 1989-1990 time period, Kashmir's radical Islamic terrorism resulted in genocide and forced exodus of over 99% of Kashmiri Hindu community. Gain so-called freedom or azadi, Pakistan-trained terrorists, along with the armed radical Islamists from a large section of local Kashmiri Muslim population, used terror to completely rid Kashmir of its non-Muslim minorities. They openly killed, raped, and terrorized the so-called Kafirs, the infidels, meaning the Kashmiri Hindus. On January 4, 1990, Aftab, a local Urdu newspaper, published Hizbul Mujahideen's press release warning all Kashmiri Hindus to leave the valley immediately. Another ultimatum was issued through the local press on April 14, 1990, ordering Kashmiri Hindus to leave the valley within 2 days or face death. This was happening when Dr. Farooq Gupta was the Chief Minister of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. My own family received a written warning notice signed by armed terrorist commander of that region to leave home within 36 hours or get slaughtered in our own home. Imagine the fear-struck unarmed members of my family, including small children, hurriedly trying to pick a few suitcases, arranging transportation, just running for their lives, leaving behind their roots, ancestral home, and lifetime memories. Our distressed soul home is no longer there, my friends. It already got razed to the ground by our Muslim neighbor. My children can never see my home. The maternal uncle of my wife, Badrinath Kaul, even could not run for his life. A few armed terrorists barged in his home, opened fire, killing him, his wife, and few close relations on the spot. His son got hit near his eye, survived, but could not even perform the last rites of his Hindu parents. Imagine a panic-struck young boy in pain, suddenly looking around to see his parents and close relatives lying dead on the floor in his own house, surrounded by the gushing blood. As expected, the Muslim terrorist-friendly local police, when informed, looked the other way. To the Indian government, international agencies, politicians and democracies of the world who proclaim to care about human rights violation and genocide, I, as a Kashmiri Hindu, have a few questions. Number one, when 99% of minority Kashmiri Hindu community gets hounded out of their homes, uprooted from their motherland, and forced to run for their lives by Islamic terrorists, is that not genocide and human rights violations? If unarmed, law-abiding members of Kashmiri Hindu community, labeled as so-called kafirs, get savagely slaughtered and raped by the Islamic terrorists, and their temples get desecrated or destroyed, is that not genocide and human rights violation? When a Kashmiri Hindu woman gets gang raped for days, Girjatiku by name, then cut into pieces with a saw, and armed terrorists slaughter men, women, and children in Nadimurg village in broad daylight, is that not human rights violation? Lastly, why is a well-documented genocide and human rights violation of Kashmiri Hindus still not officially recognized? When did the conscience of humanity die? Like every Hindu, I am still awaiting answers. I am awaiting justice. From whom? From those who proclaim to protect the minorities, from those who proclaim to stand for law, to those who stand for peaceful life and support of law-abiding citizens. That's exactly what we were. But still, we as a community, almost 400,000 Kashmiri Hindus uprooted from Muslim-dominated Kashmir Valley, have become refugees in our own country. No one cared, no one listened, the world stayed silent. Then Indian government, the US, the Europe, the judiciary, the journalist, the ideology tainted intellectuals, all remained silent when the massacre and rape happened in Kashmir in 1989-99 period. What more does this community have to do to wake up the conscience of the world, the so-called watchers of genocide, the so-called organizations standing for the human rights? What more does this community have to live through to open your eyes to the genocide of this community? Is cutting human bodies into pieces not enough? Is rape of women not enough? If murder of children is not enough, if uprooting from our own homes is not enough, if losing our culture is not enough, if losing our temples is not enough, if losing our language is not enough, my dear friends, tell me, what more does the world need to see? What more would it take to open the eyes of those who are the deniers of Holocaust as well as deniers of Kashmiri Hindu genocide? We have always seen that. Yes, there's all that manufactured narratives about Kashmir, propaganda about Kashmir, well-funded propaganda from across.
1 minute, Mark.
Who try to paint you that the perpetrators of genocide and human rights violation in Kashmir, those who perpetrated them, they are painted as the victims. If security forces try to control terrorism and protect the majority civilian Kashmiri Muslim population and helped for that to do, and for some days, for few months, they have to block internet. A lot of world wakes up, people can talk about it. They think it's a violation of human rights. What happened to the human rights violation of Kashmiri Hindus? Their bodies got cut, their women got raped, their language got lost, their temples got lost, their children can never go back home. I hope this agency, SISTEEN, would look into it and communicate our pain to those who need to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan Sapruji, and thank you for your testimony.
Our next scheduled witness is Dr. Tej Tikku. I'm not seeing him in the list of attendees. If you are here, please speak up. In the meantime, I will call upon Mr. Aditya Raj Kaul.
Very much, Carl, and thank you to all of you for listening to us. This is perhaps one of the first times in the last 32 years that a human rights group has risen to the occasion and in fact called the victims themselves to speak. Now, these victims are not people that haven't spoken. They have spoken for the last 32 years, and yet nobody has heard them. They're waiting for the wheels of justice to move. And that's why, from the core of my heart, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for at least listening to us. Because for the last 32 years, we have not only not been demanding justice, we've been demanding an acknowledgement. And that acknowledgement seems to be coming now, at least. Because that acknowledgement will finally someday lead to justice, will lead to truth and reconciliation. And perhaps someday, we may not be alive, but future generations can be rehabilitated and can go back to their own homeland in Kashmir. I am perhaps one of the youngest persons today in this forum deposing before this Human Rights Commission. I was only 9 months old when the exodus happened. On the 19th January 1990, I was with my mother. I was in her lap in a house in Rainawari, Srinagar, Kashmir. And my grandparents were with me. My father was not there because my uncle had met an accident in another northern Indian city of Chandigarh. And he couldn't be there with us. My parents, my mother specifically, and my grandparents who are not anymore with us, tell me how there were slogans from the mosques on that day. And they were scared for their lives, not just my family, but hundreds and thousands of others, and not just in the district of Srinagar in Kashmir. In several other districts of Kashmir simultaneously, there were these threatening slogans that other victims have also spoken about for the last 32 years. And these slogans said that the Kashmiri Hindus, the Kashmiri Pandits, which was a minuscule minority, should leave immediately, should perish, or should join this so-called pan-Islamist struggle. My family, my uncle, had some courage and he went to the bus depot and purchased a ticket, our ticket to exile. And we finally left Srinagar in the dead of the night and never saw our house again. Thousands of us, my community members, left our homeland and we started a life again in Jammu. But this didn't happen overnight. This happened over a period of several weeks and months. There were several popular and very celebrated personalities among the Kashmiri Pandit community who were selectively targeted and assassinated. They were judges, they were scholars, they were poets, they were writers, and they were common Kashmiri Pandits who did not believe in any kind of violence, who did not perhaps have even a political ideology, but were attacked for being Hindus in Kashmir, for not believing in Pakistan's propaganda, for not standing with the Islamist terrorists, with the terror groups like the Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front and Hizbul Mujahideen, who selectively targeted Kashmiri Pandits. We started our life, my family started our life yet again in the January of 1990 from a garage in Jammu, where 16 members of my family stayed. That garage was attached to a cowshed, and that became our refugee camp in the first few weeks and months of exile. And this is not just my story. As I say, this is a story of thousands of others who, in sweltering heat of Jammu, a few kilometers, couple of 100 kilometers away from Jammu, from Kashmir, stayed there in sweltering heat in different camps of Muthi, Mishriwala, Purkhu, and even after 32 years today, are in a very poor condition in the township of Jagati, not very far from Jammu, and in Muthi, Purkhu, and Mishriwala as well. For the last 32 years, we have been struggling. I was one of the youngest, perhaps in the early 90s, who protested outside the UN office in Delhi when Boutros Ghali actually visited. We demanded only justice. We do not seek revenge. We do not seek any kind of a hate against any community or a group of people. Even though we have never picked up arms, we have never formed any kind of a violent struggle or a violent group, we have peacefully only believed in education and a sense of justice and belief in the Indian judicial system and the Indian democracy and secular credentials. But still, we have been ignored. We have been relegated to the margins. And today, through you, we appeal not just to the Indian government, but the US lawmakers as well, that we demand justice. Immediately after I joined college in 2006, I formed a group called Roots in Kashmir, along with several other friends. Our sole objective was to demand justice, was to spread awareness about this minuscule minority of Kashmiri Pandits all across the globe. We protested every time a radical separatist or a terrorist came in Delhi or was garlanded and was given, a forum to speak, while we Kashmiri Pandits were ignored. Even the Indian government did not spare us. Whenever we protested against the terrorists and separatists, we were arrested. Our voice was muzzled, while the terrorists like Yasin Malik and Bitta Karate were not only given a podium to speak, a platform to speak, but were given space on the BBC, where they confessed to their crimes of committing terrorism, of killing the Kashmiri Pandit community, and also the security forces in Kashmir. I remember several instances where I stood protesting silently, holding a banner in front of several UN organizations, Indian government, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, but nobody cared, nobody listened to us. Perhaps there should be an audit, there should be an investigation, there should be a probe, or maybe just a research on what Amnesty International or the Human Rights Watch, how many times in the last 32 years have they spoken about Kashmiri Pandits? Are we lesser human beings? Why did the world remain silent when we wanted justice? Hundreds of our members of our community have been killed, have been raped. Thousands and lakhs of us have lost our house. Our temples have been desecrated completely in Kashmir Valley. I today work as a senior editor, a journalist in a media organization. I'm a television anchor as well. But where was the media in these 32 years in India and the globe? Why did they not actually question the successive governments who have failed to provide us justice? Well, a lot of speakers have spoken. There's a lot of debate across the globe today after the release of a film called The Kashmir Files, which actually gives for the first time on the big screen a truthful account of our suffering, of our pain, of our longing. Today, before Mr. Vednanda and Carl and several others respected members who have invited me to speak, I would like to put forth 10 demands from the Kashmiri Pandit community. A lot of people have spoken about what pain they have been going through. A lot of people have spoken about what happened in 1990. And a lot of people challenge us that there was no exodus, there was no genocide, there was no ethnic cleansing. But there are victims who are still alive. You can, if you want, you can speak to them in different parts of the globe. There were no FIRs that were registered. There were no investigation that was carried out in the cases of our killings. So what are these 10 demands that all the Kashmiri Pandit organizations, all Kashmiri Pandits together have been demanding? First and foremost, Kashmiri Pandits are not migrants. We should be declared, as the UN definition, as internally displaced people. What happened in 1990, the carnage, the massacre of Kashmiri Pandits, should be declared as a genocide, as an ethnic cleansing. As the National Human Rights Commission of India also years ago said, that this is something that is akin to ethnic cleansing. Please recognize us. Please don't abandon us. Kashmiri Pandits also demand a speedy trial against terrorist Yasin Malik, who is the face of the carnage against the Kashmiri Pandit community. Today, he's in the biggest prison, Tihar jail of New Delhi, but not for the crimes that he committed against the Kashmiri Pandit community. He's in prison because of a Hawala terror case that happened much later. Kashmiri Pandit community also demands retrial of the case against Bitta Karate, also known as Farooq Ahmad Dar, another terrorist of the same organization, Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front. Bitta Karate spent 16 years in prison, but was released from jail when a judge in Jammu of a special court in Diwani said that the prosecution did not seem to be interested to convict him. The Supreme Court also intervened and finally released him. Bitta Karate was garlanded by hundreds and thousands of people in Srinagar when he arrived back from prison, clearly indicating that there was local support to the Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front, to these terrorist organizations against the Kashmiri Pandits. Both Yasin Malik and Bitta Karate, in different interviews, have confessed themselves that they have killed Kashmiri Pandits. Not just Kashmiri Pandits, but also Indian Air Force men who were unarmed, standing at a bus stop, waiting. So why has the Indian government failed to convict them?
1 minute.
The Prime Minister Modi and the Indian government needs to immediately form a commission of inquiry to probe the circumstances that led to this exodus, this genocide, this ethnic cleansing. What were the reasons behind it? Meet the victims. Let them depose before you. Go through the media articles of that time. Let the bureaucrats and the police officers of that time be probed as well. Let there be an investigation of the Home Minister of that time, Mufti Mohammad Saeed, and the Chief Minister of that time, Farooq Abdullah. Were they involved in some way with the Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front? Why were they silent? The Union government also needs to immediately provide better living conditions to the Kashmiri Pandit internally displaced people in Jammu. They live in pathetic conditions without 24/7 electricity or water and without jobs or daily wages in many cases. Imagine a community which had huge lands and even houses which had 14 to 15 rooms abandoned completely and almost begging for survival. We also demand that economically weaker sections of the Kashmiri Pandit community should be provided, in fact, scholarship and education till their college and university by the government of India, those who have been completely ignored and stay in Jammu. There was a Prime Minister's economic package that was announced by Manmohan Singh and is being carried forward by the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Not many Kashmiri Pandits have been willing to go back to Kashmir, but they've been forced to under this Prime Minister's package because those economically weaker sections do not have any other option. But any time a Kashmiri Pandit is killed, like it happened last year in October when Makhanlal Bindru, a chemist, a prominent member of the Kashmiri Pandit community, was killed, hundreds of those PM package employees left back. Those Prime Minister package Kashmiri Pandit employees need to be provided not just security, but also should not be forced to stay in their home district. They should be on compassionate grounds provided a job and security at a place of their choosing. Kashmiri Pandit organizations, Panun Kashmir, Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora, Roots in Kashmir, Kashmiri Samiti, Jammu Kashmir Vichar Manch, and All India Kashmiri Samaj should be, in fact, involved in any kind of a political dialogue, not just on Kashmiri Pandits, but on the fate of Kashmir as well. They should not be ignored. The Indian Ministry of Culture and the Archaeological Survey of India immediately should order restoration of more than 450 temples Hindu shrines that have been desecrated in the Kashmir Valley in the last 32 to 35 years. Why did this happen? Immediately, the government of India should take a call and, in fact, prevent that this important heritage, some temples being thousands of years old, should not perish completely in Kashmir. Lastly, I would appeal that the Kashmiri language will also die, just like the Kashmiri Pandits are dying in exile. The Kashmiri language has its script, which is known as the Sharda script. The government of India should recognize this script and issue orders as per the Ministry of Culture in the Union Ministry to preserve our language and do take steps so that this can be compulsory in the University of Kashmir and several other educational institutions in Jammu and Kashmir and rest of India. My appeal through you would only be today that show us empathy. Do not deny that an exodus, a genocide, and ethnic cleansing happened. We are continuously perishing in exile. Tomorrow, we may not live. Tomorrow, we may perish. But we will continue this fight for justice until Yasin Malik and Bitta Karate are convicted, until the government of India recognizes that a genocide had happened, and until finally the last Kashmiri Pandit returns to Kashmir Valley someday. Thank you so much.
Aditya Kaulji, thank you very much. As part of the media demands that you have put, as the commission will be forwarding them and will take adequate and prompt action as you have called for. Thank you. To remaining presenters, I have, with great deal of awkwardness, to request you that each one of you speak for 5 minutes. We need to conclude this session within 2 hours, and my apologies that there is not enough time for everyone to take 7 to 8 minutes. So kindly take 5 minutes. All your presentations will be preserved, will be kept, will be read, will be used in order to put our own demands to the government of India, to the United States, to the United Nations. Thank you.
I next call upon Mr. Ashwini Kumar Chungu.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you very much, all the chairman, as well as the honorable members of this commission. I am here to put before you an important dimension of this issue. That is the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits. In my opinion, so far as genocide is concerned, it is not only an issue of numbers. Genocide is basically the issue of the intent of crime. I am amongst those contributors to this fight of genocide and human rights violations. We were the people who took the issue of genocide of Kashmiri Pandits to the National Human Rights Commission. Way back in 1994, when it was established in 1993. And before this, that I would speak on this issue, I would like to emphasize that our main issue was about the intent of the crime. Why, after all, it was done. I would like you to take you to an era which is as far as 1933. From the source, that is J&K archives of the J&K department, file number 31 of the political department. It says that in Tragpora village of Baramulla, Sheikh Abdullah made a speech and he said in 1933 that the task of the Muslim conference and Muslims was to turn out the Hindus from Kashmir. This is as old as 1933. And this is in the records of the J&K archives, J&K government, file number 31 of the political department. With this, I would like to emphasize that there was always an intent so far as the crime of genocide is concerned. I take you to 1985, when we organized a convention of Kashmiri Hindus in Kashmir, 1985, I emphasize. It is the July 8th, 1985 report of Hindustan Times correspondent. It says, finally, the convention pointed out that there was a mass exodus of the members of minority community from the state of Jammu and Kashmir to other parts of the country. This was a dangerous trend which should be stopped. There was indeed a sinister conspiracy to throw out the non-Muslims from the valley so that the designs of complete Islamization were fulfilled. Unquote. Why I say so, and I take you to history, is because what happened in 1987, 88, 89 or 90 or thereafter had its roots in the basic intent of the crime. Terrorism was used as an instrument to accomplish the intent of crime. The intent of crime was straight: ethnic cleansing of Kashmir from Kashmiri Hindus. I emphasize that in 1986, when there was no terrorism, there was a raid on the temples of Hindus in Kashmir, and as many as 46 temples were burnt, razed to ground. This is incorporated in our report that we submitted before National Human Rights Commission. There are details about these attacks, and a copy of that is also contained in our document that is known as Kashmir Documentation Pandits in Exile. A copy of this document was handed over by me to the Honorable Chairman of this commission, Professor Ved Nandaji at Delhi. And I requested him that it is not only 1986 that has been covered in it. After 1986, there were several instances in which hundreds of temples were brought down, along with the first information report. The whole narration of these desecrations and destructions are carried in this document, which is known as Kashmir Documentation Pandits in Exile. Only on one stroke, on your keyboard, you can get this book before you on the keyboard, on the screen. And then I need also to emphasize that when the Kashmiri Pandits were killed and exodus took place, that is one aspect of the issue. Another aspect of, and the most important aspect of the issues, is that not only their temples left over were burnt and razed to the ground, but their 30,000 houses were burnt, destroyed, their business houses, their schools, their colleges, their educational institutions, their ashrams, and their buildings, along with the properties attached to their
1 minute to conclude, sir.
Other issues, they were also destroyed. I need to emphasize here regarding Second World War. Regarding Second World War, we know that the Jews were the primary victims of the war, but they were neither a part of the Axis nor a part of the Allies. Still, they were made the victims. It is because Hitler had an intent of the crime in his mind. His whole coterie had the intent of this mind. They used Second World War to destroy Jews as a race. Similarly, in Kashmir, terrorism was used as an instrument to destroy Kashmiri Pandits, and genocide was inflicted upon them. Ethnic cleansing has been accepted, and acts akin to genocide have happened against Kashmiri Pandits, and a genocide type design may exist. These are the things that have been observed by National Human Rights Commission in its judgment on the issue of genocide of Kashmiri Pandits on 11th June 1999. That judgment is also carried in this document known as Kashmir Documentation Pandits in Exile. I would be highly thankful to this commission that all these documents which are preserved in this document, they kindly visit that. I can assure you that there are more documents that can be supplied to you, forwarded to you, so far as genocide of Kashmiri Pandits is concerned. And my whole issue is that this commission should also emphasize upon that is the intent of the crime. In my opinion, in this issue, while all other issues so far as killings are concerned, destruction of our property is concerned, they are absolutely a correct narration. But at the same time, we should focus on the most important thing of the crime, that is the intent of the crime. With this, I presume, and it is my belief, that this initiative that has been taken by this commission will be historic. It will be definitely historic if the commission comes out with a report that recognizes the acts of genocide against the Kashmiri Pandits. Thank you very much.
Ashwini Kumarji, thank you for your testimony.
At the very end, I would like to call upon Mr. Deepak, if you are there and would like to testify. Mr. Deepak, if you would like to testify, please unmute yourself. I guess not. So I think we're at the end of the list of witnesses, Professor Nanda.
Thank you very much. Let's have the gallery on. Thank you. Mr. Clemens, can I look at all the...
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm deeply grateful to all the presenters. I think you have given a very clear message that there can be no peace without justice. You have sought for acknowledgement, you have sought for a tribunal, you have sought for recognition, you have sought for Kashmiri language, and the demands that you have put and the presentations that you have made, they are a part of this record, and the commission will take appropriate action according to your own demands, according to your own presentation. I am going to call upon my distinguished colleagues, if they want to make a statement, a quick one, kindly do so. I can simply say one thing, that I consider myself pretty tough. But after hearing all that, I have to agree with many who said in the chat that they cannot stop crying, because this is something that at the present time not only touches us all, but it's a cry for justice. It's a cry for action. It's a cry for all these people to be able to go back and live in peace and harmony in the land that their ancestors and for thousands of years were the cradle of Hindu civilization. I won't say anything more. Dr. Adityanji, a quick statement. Dr. Pathak, a quick statement. And then we'll conclude this presentation with a very clear message to you that the Commission will do what it can within its own constraints, but at the same time, present it to the appropriate bodies, including the three: the Government of India, the Government of the United States, and the United Nations. Thank you. Dr. Adityanji.
Thank you, Professor Nanda. I would say to all those people who testified, had the courage, had the fortitude to speak out, we understand your pain. We understand the anguish, and we, as the International Commission for Human Rights and Religious Freedom, are here to ensure that the voices of tiny minorities are not silenced out, irrespective of their background. We understand that the traditional establishment of human rights industry stood by silent. There was a conspiracy of silence, and we are here to rectify that. I'm just going to say 2 words. Never again. Never again. Thank you.
Dr. Pathak. Pathak, please unmute yourself.
I was closely associated with Mr. Jagan Kaul in early 90s, and we had some demonstrations in those days. I hope some of you must be knowing Mr. Jagan Kaul. Now we did efforts at that time communicating with the senators and congressmen, but nobody was ready to believe it. Then I came in contact with another lady who was a teenager girl who moved out of, their family was required to move out of Kashmir and lost many of their family members. I heard this, and all these presentations and all these depositions have really confirmed what was happening there. And I agreed with one of the young presenter here. The person who suffered so much coming out of Kashmir still completed her PhD in physics and then came here and working hard. So it is really touching our hearts, and definitely the all the recommendations which are mentioned by all our presenters will be taken up, and the commission will try their level best to make sure that it goes in the right hands and see to it that more action can be seen. Thank you very much, all of you, for all the great things you have shared with us. And I really appreciate and share all the sorrow and sadness you have gone through it. And my sincere, heartfelt condolences to those who lost their families. And I think justice will definitely be coming to all of us. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pathak. As Dityanji said, never again. And you remember that after Holocaust, we said the same thing. And then the killing fields of Cambodia, what happened in Rwanda, in other places, in Kashmir, Bangladesh before that. And so I hope that we can make that dream a reality. I want to pay my own tribute to all of you who presented today, who made recommendations, and my also special thanks to all of you who came with only one request. Kindly keep spreading this word. Please know that acknowledgement, remembrance, that is absolutely essential. We should never forget what happened. Unless we remember it, we cannot take action. And so today, this commission is grateful to all of you for making this occasion that was said, we do hope, a historic one. We do hope that even this commission's feeble voice will carry its weight. And what you have demanded, justice. What you have demanded is acknowledgement. What you have demanded is for all these Kashmiri Hindus to be able to go back, and the government of India take appropriate action as well. That has not been done. So I'm deeply grateful to each one of you, and I adjourn this presentation and this hearing today.